show for today. Dr. Madu is talking about some interesting aspects of President Barack Obama's election and what it means to the continent of Africa. And of course, Dr. Madu, let's continue, as we've indicated earlier, that we're talking essentially, as far as American foreign policy is concerned, about a lost continent. And we're simply trying to resurrect this continent in terms of what it has and what it has to offer. Let's pick it up at that point.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, we've invested in a lot of projects in the past that have not borne any results or fruits, you know, particularly during the so-called Cold War. The money was being thrown at dictators like Mobutu and the rest, you know, just to buy them, to keep them off from Russia. It didn't do any good to African countries. What it did was increase tensions, you know, in society because of the corrupt, you know, inclination of most of those politicians, you see. So I think one of the things, you know, the new president in the U.S. has to do is invest in peacemaking, you know, an integrated approach to peacemaking. For example, in the Sudan, okay, we had a peaceful agreement between the central government and Southern Sudan, but left Darfur. That was not integrated. That problem still exists. What the better approach should have been to handle all three situations at the same time. Sign all those agreements at the same time, so there'll be peace in Darfur at the same time as peace in South Sudan. Instead, what the Bush administration did, you know, was bring the Southern Sudanese and the central government together to sign a peace agreement, leaving Darfur for another time. It should have been all three together. You see, that would have been better. Now the conflict is still raging. You see, another problem is not identifying the source of the conflicts. At times, most of the conflicts in Africa are more complex than you see because of the division of the borders. For example, in Sudan, you have the Lord's Resistance Army. And one will say, well, how come they've been fighting for so long? Who's supporting them? The fact is that they have kith and kin across the border in Sudan. You have what you call the Sudanese Acholi. The Lord's Resistance Army is predominantly an Acholi, you know, funded army. In Uganda, so they cross, you know, so you can't deal with the Lord Resistance Army in isolation without dealing with the Sudanese problem. Understand? Exactly. The same thing happening in Chad. You know, a lot of people, ethnic group in Chad also have their kith and kin in Darfur, in the Sudan. You see? So these are all mixed together. The same with the Congo. You see the problem happening in the Congo. You have what you call the Kenya-Rwanda in the Congo. People who came from Rwanda. Okay. So any problem concerning Rwanda, they will feel also involved because their kids are across the border. You see, so these conflicts are all interwoven. So what has been happening is that they've been dealt in isolation, not thinking about the overall, you know, overarching relationship. The crisis in Somalia, you can't deal with it in isolation without dealing with the problem still festering between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Okay? Because those three problems are interrelated. See, one way or the other. You know, in Ethiopia, you have, in Ogaden Desert, you have people who have kith and kin in Somalia, called the Afars and Isars. You see? So they will sympathize with their kith and kin across the border. The same with Djibouti. Djibouti, those who occupy Djibouti also are the Afars and Isars, who also have kith and kin in Somalia. In fact, Somalia still claims Djibouti as part of it, claims the Ogaden Desert as part of it. So you cannot deal with those problems there in isolation. You have to deal with the Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia problem as an integrated regional approach. The same way you deal with the Sudanese, Ugandan, Chadian problem as also an integrated, you know, approach to crisis solving. That is very important, you see. So you cannot deal with it in isolation. The same with the Congo problem. Rwanda, Burundi, you know, Congo, Uganda, it has to be dealt also
all together.
Exactly, in a regional context, in a strategic regional context. See, because of the interlocking relationships across the borders.
And you think that we are in a position, our policymakers would probably be in a position better than any Western European country to deal on a regional fashion with these countries simply because we've never been involved in these countries before, and we would not, especially think to have had any kind of favoritism toward one or the other. Would that be
as a colonial power? You know, the U.S. has never been a colonial power in Africa.
Okay.
Though, you know, during the independence movements and in the continent, you know, it played a role in supporting the regimes that wanted to stay naively, you know. So in that sense, we've been involved in Africa, but not, you know, as part of a colonial power.
What we do. Very good.
So in a way, we are more of an independent arbiter, more acceptable probably to some people than those who've been colonial powers before, who still have vested interest in what is happening in those countries. You know, for example, I know that, you know, a lot of the French-speaking countries always under pressure from France not to work with the United States because of what they feel, you know, is U.S. attempts to meddle in their spheres of influence. Exactly. When the West African Economic Community, ECOWAS, was being initiated by General Gowon in Nigeria in the early 70s, the French wanted to block it. Yeah, they kept, you know, telling the French countries, well, Nigeria wants to dominate you all, but not thinking these are all the same people who want to form a union for their own interests. And you are sitting in Paris telling them not to work with their own fellow brothers there. Exactly, that has been the problem, even in the United Nations. Yeah, the French government pressures the French-speaking, you know, governments not to, you know,
to cooperate.
Exactly, cooperate in what is in the interest of the whole African continent because of the fear of you know, their economic interests.
And so we have that great